The bitter taste of my morning coffee couldn't mask the metallic flavor that had been coating my tongue for weeks now. I sat at my kitchen table, the familiar weight of my pill organizer in my palm, watching the September sunlight filter through the gauze curtains I'd hung just last month. Everything in my cozy Phoenix apartment should have felt normal. The hum of the air conditioner fighting the desert heat, the distant sound of children playing in the courtyard below, the comforting routine of taking my medication with breakfast. But nothing felt normal anymore. My hands trembled as I opened Thursday's compartment, and for the third time this week, I found myself staring at pills that looked slightly different than usual. The white tablets seemed chalkier, more crumbly around the edges, and my blood pressure medication had an odd, dusty residue clinging to it. What I'm about to tell you is absolutely true and will leave you speechless. Please like and subscribe. Tell me which city you call home. Because what started as small inconsistencies with my medication has turned into something that makes me question my own sanity. My name is Carmen Diaz. I'm 47 years old, and I've been managing my anxiety and hypertension with the same medications for over 5 years. I work as a part-time bookkeeper from home, and my daily routine revolves around the precise timing of my pills: 8 a.m. with breakfast, 2 p.m. with lunch, and 8 p.m. with dinner. This schedule has kept me stable, focused, and able to maintain the quiet life I've built in this sun-drenched retirement community where my neighbors know each other's business and the pool area serves as our unofficial town square. But over the past month, everything has been falling apart. I've been having panic attacks in the grocery store. My blood pressure has been spiking during routine activities, and I've been experiencing mood swings that leave me crying over spilled coffee one minute and snapping at the mailman the next. The episodes are becoming more frequent and more intense, and I can see the worry creeping into the eyes of everyone around me. The person I trusted most to help me through this difficult time is Melissa Chen, my closest friend for the past 3 years. We met at the community center's book club, bonding over our shared love of mystery novels and our experiences as women navigating life in our 40s. Melissa is 44, recently divorced, and works as a pharmacy technician at the Walgreens, just 2 miles from our complex. She has shoulder-length black hair that she always wears in a neat bob, kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of gentle, methodical personality that made me feel safe confiding in her about my health struggles. Melissa has her own key to my apartment, something I offered 6 months ago when I had a severe anxiety episode and needed someone nearby who could check on me. She often stops by in the mornings before her shift, bringing fresh bagels from the bakery near her work and sitting with me while I sort my medications for the week. Her knowledge of pharmaceuticals has been invaluable, and she's the one who suggested I switch to the large, compartmentalized pill organizer that sits on my kitchen counter like a small pharmacy. My daughter, Sophia Diaz, has been my anchor through all of this uncertainty. At 23, she's working as a dental hygienist in Scottsdale while finishing her degree in healthcare administration at Arizona State University. Sophia inherited my dark curly hair and my late husband's strong jawline, but her personality is entirely her own. Fierce, protective, and incredibly intuitive about people's motives. She drives over from her apartment every Tuesday and Friday evening, bringing dinner and staying to watch old movies on my couch that's seen better days but holds too many memories to replace. Sophia has been increasingly worried about my erratic behavior, and last week she suggested I see a different doctor for a second opinion about my medications. She's noticed things I thought I was hiding, the way I've started checking and double-checking locks, the tremor in my voice during our phone calls, the dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights spent worrying about imaginary threats. Her concern is loving, but persistent, and she started asking pointed questions about my daily routine and who has access to my apartment. The fourth person who's become essential to understanding what's happening to me is Dorothy Martinez, my 68-year-old neighbor who lives directly across the courtyard. Dorothy is a retired nurse with steel gray hair she keeps in a practical pixie cut and hands that still move with the precision of someone who spent 40 years administering medications and monitoring patients. She has the sharp, observant eyes of someone trained to notice when things are out of place, and she's been watching my comings and goings with increasing interest. Dorothy and I developed a friendship over shared morning walks around the complex, and she's the one who first mentioned that my symptoms sounded inconsistent with the medications I described taking. As someone who specialized in cardiac care, she knows my blood pressure medication intimately, and she's been gently probing about my pharmacy, my storage methods, and who else might have access to my pills. Her questions feel casual, but I can sense the professional concern beneath her neighborly interest. 3 days ago, I decided to start investigating the inconsistencies myself. I began by carefully examining each pill before taking it, noting the shape, color, and markings on a small notepad I keep beside my pill organizer. What I discovered made my stomach drop. Several of my tablets had markings that didn't match the prescription bottles, and some appeared to have been tampered with, showing tiny chips and scratches that suggested they'd been handled more than they should have been. Yesterday morning, after Melissa's usual visit, I found myself staring at my pill organizer with growing suspicion. She had been unusually interested in my weekly sorting routine, asking detailed questions about my dosages and timing. She'd also made several comments about how stressed I seemed and how maybe I needed to consider adjusting my medications or taking a break from my work responsibilities. Her concern felt genuine, but something in her tone made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite articulate. That evening, Sophia called and mentioned something that made my blood run cold. She said she'd run into Melissa at the grocery store, and Melissa had made several unprompted comments about my deteriorating mental state. According to Sophia, Melissa had suggested that I was becoming paranoid and might need professional help, possibly even a brief stay somewhere I could be monitored and my medications properly regulated. The conversation had left Sophia feeling uneasy, especially since I hadn't mentioned any of these concerns to Melissa myself. This morning, I sat with Dorothy on her small balcony, sharing coffee and trying to make sense of the pieces floating around in my mind. I showed her my notepad with the pill observations, and I watched her face grow serious as she examined my notes. She asked me directly who had access to my medication, and when I mentioned Melissa's key and her pharmacy background, Dorothy's expression shifted to something I recognized from my own years of reading people: suspicion mixed with protective anger. The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut. After showing Dorothy my notebook, I decided I needed concrete proof before making any accusations. "Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She set down her coffee cup and leaned forward. "Of course, dear. What is it?" "Have you ever noticed anything unusual about Melissa's behavior when she visits me? I know you're often on your balcony when she comes and goes." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands folding in her lap. "I've been wondering when you'd ask me that question. Yes, I have noticed some things, but I wasn't sure if I should say anything." My heart began racing. "What kind of things?" "Well, for starters, she stays much longer than a typical neighborly visit would warrant. Sometimes 2 or 3 hours. And I've seen her coming and going from your apartment when you're not home. She told me you'd asked her to water your plants or check on things, but something about it felt off." I felt a chill run down my spine. I never asked her to do any of those things when I wasn't home. I was afraid of that. Dorothy reached over and patted my hand. "There's something else. Last week, when she left your place, she was carrying a small bag from Myers Pharmacy. It struck me as odd because she'd gone in empty-handed." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Dorothy, I need to set up some kind of test. Something to prove what's happening without putting myself in danger. What did you have in mind? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Sophia's name appeared on the screen. Margaret, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I can't shake this feeling that something's really wrong, Sophia said, without preamble. I did some research online about medication tampering, and the symptoms you've been describing match exactly what happens when blood pressure medications are switched or altered. Sophia, I'm at Dorothy's right now, and we were just discussing this. Can you come over? I'm actually already in the parking lot. I was hoping to catch you before you took your evening medications. 10 minutes later, the three of us sat in Dorothy's small living room, my pill organizer spread out on her coffee table like evidence in a criminal case. Sophia, wearing her nursing scrubs from her shift, carefully examined each compartment. Margaret, look at this. These pills in your evening slot aren't the same as what's in your prescription bottle. The markings are completely different. Dorothy adjusted her reading glasses and peered closer. I may not know much about medications, but even I can see these don't match. But how is she doing it? I asked. And why? Sophia sat back in her chair, her expression grim. The how is easy if she has pharmacy access. She could be substituting your medications with placebos, lower dosages, or even different medications entirely. The why is more complicated, but from what you've told me about her comments to people, it sounds like she's trying to make you appear unstable. But what would she gain from that? Dorothy asked. I felt my stomach clench as a horrible realization dawned on me. My job. She's been pushing me to take a leave of absence, saying I need help. If I appear mentally unstable, incompetent at work, she could position herself as the concerned friend who's been trying to help. Sophia finished. Maybe even suggest she could take over some of your responsibilities temporarily. Dorothy shook her head in disgust. That's diabolical. How long has this been going on? I think it started about 6 months ago, right around the time she began offering to help organize my medications, I said, feeling foolish for not seeing it sooner. She said it would be easier for me, less stressful. Sophia stood up and began pacing Dorothy's small living room. We need to document everything, every symptom, every interaction, every discrepancy in your medications. But more importantly, we need to catch her in the act. How do we do that safely? Dorothy asked. I have an idea, I said slowly. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Melissa always comes over Wednesday evenings to check on me and help me sort my pills for the week. What if we set up a way to record what she's actually doing? Sophia nodded approvingly. That could work, but we need to be careful. If she realizes we're onto her, she might escalate things. Or disappear entirely, Dorothy added. And then you'd never have proof of what she did. I looked at both women, feeling grateful for their support, but terrified of what we were planning. There's something else I haven't told you. This morning, I got a call from my supervisor asking if I was feeling all right. Apparently, someone had contacted them expressing concern about my mental state and my ability to handle my current workload. Sophia's eyes widened. She's already started making moves against your job. We can't wait any longer, Dorothy said firmly. We need to catch her tomorrow night. As we began planning our strategy, I couldn't help but think about all the times Melissa had sat in my living room, expressing concern about my health, offering help, all while systematically poisoning me and destroying my reputation. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. One more thing, Sophia said as we finalized our plans. After tomorrow night, regardless of what we discover, you're not taking any more of those medications until we can get you fresh prescriptions from a different pharmacy." I nodded, knowing she was right, but feeling anxious about going off my blood pressure medication cold turkey. "Don't worry," Dorothy said, as if reading my thoughts. "We'll monitor you closely. Better to be safe than sorry." As Sophia prepared to leave, she turned back to me with a serious expression. "Margaret, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that this goes deeper than medication tampering. If she's been planning this for months, there might be other things she's done that we haven't discovered yet." The implications of her words settled over me like a dark cloud. If Melissa had been willing to poison me and sabotage my career, what else might she have done? And more importantly, what would she do when she realized we were onto her? That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I heard the familiar sound of a key turning in my front door. The sound of my front door opening sent ice through my veins. I lay perfectly still, listening to the soft footsteps in my hallway. Only 2 people had keys to my apartment besides me: Dorothy, my sister, and Melissa. At 11:30 at night, it definitely wasn't Dorothy. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, fingers trembling as I quickly texted Dorothy. "She's here. In my apartment right now." Then I set the phone to silent and slipped it under my pillow. The footsteps moved through my living room, pausing near the kitchen where I kept my medication organizer. My heart hammered so loudly, I was sure she could hear it from down the hall. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deeply, like someone in natural sleep. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, I heard the front door close again. I waited another 20 minutes before creeping out of bed to check my pill organizer. Sure enough, the Wednesday compartment looked different. The small white blood pressure pill that should have been there was gone, replaced by something that looked similar, but had tiny blue specks in it. My phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. "Are you okay? I'm coming over." "I'm fine. She's gone." "But Dorothy, she switched something in tonight's compartment." When Dorothy arrived 15 minutes later, she took one look at the pill and shook her head grimly. "This is definitely not your blood pressure medication. We need to call Sophia first thing in the morning. I can't believe she just walks into my apartment whenever she wants," I said, sinking onto my couch. "How long has she been doing this? How many nights has she been here while I was sleeping?" Dorothy sat beside me, her face pale. "I think we need to change your locks tomorrow before she comes over for your Wednesday evening visit. But if we do that, she'll know we're suspicious. Margaret, she's breaking into your apartment at night. We're way past worrying about making her suspicious." The next morning, Sophia arrived early with a small plastic bag and tweezers. She carefully collected the suspicious pill from my medication organizer, sealing it in the bag. "I'll have this analyzed," she said. "But in the meantime, we still need to go through with tonight's plan. If she shows up and can't get in with her key, she'll know something's changed." Dorothy had called a locksmith who was coming at noon. "We'll get the locks changed, but I'll make sure Margaret has the only spare key this time." "What if she asks why her key doesn't work?" I asked. "Tell her the landlord had them changed for security reasons," Sophia suggested. "It's not uncommon." As the day progressed, my anxiety built. Every time my phone rang, I expected it to be Melissa, somehow knowing what we'd discovered. But she didn't call. At 5 o'clock, she texted her usual message. "See you at 7 for pill sorting. Bringing dinner?" The casual cheerfulness of her text, knowing what she'd been doing to me, made my stomach turn. Dorothy had hidden a small recording device behind a picture frame on my bookshelf, angled toward the kitchen table, where Melissa and I always sorted my medications. Sophia was positioned in my bedroom with the door cracked, ready to intervene if things went wrong. At exactly 7 o'clock, my doorbell rang. "Hi, sweetie," Melissa said when I opened the door, holding up a bag from my favorite Chinese restaurant. How are you feeling today? The concern in her voice sounded so genuine, so caring. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I never would have believed she was capable of what she'd been doing. I'm okay, I managed, stepping aside to let her in. A little tired. Well, that's probably the stress from work, she said, setting the food on my kitchen counter. I heard there might be some concerns about your performance lately. My blood ran cold. She was the one who had contacted my supervisor, and now she was bringing it up casually, as if she'd heard it through normal channels. Where did you hear that? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Oh, you know how these things get around, she said dismissively, unpacking the food. Small, professional community and all. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Let's eat first, then we'll get your pills sorted for the week. As we ate, Melissa chatted normally about her work, the weather, a movie she'd seen. Watching her, I realized that whatever was driving her to do this to me, she felt no guilt about it whatsoever. The ease with which she maintained her caring facade was perhaps the most chilling thing of all. After dinner, she pulled out the familiar large pill bottle and my weekly organizer. Let's see what we have for this week, she said cheerfully, unscrewing the cap. I watched, my heart pounding, as she began sorting pills into the compartments. For Monday and Tuesday, she placed the correct medications. But when she got to Wednesday, she palmed something from her pocket, dropping it into the compartment while appearing to take it from the prescription bottle. She was so smooth, so practiced at it. This was clearly not the first time. Melissa, I said quietly, what did you just put in the Wednesday compartment? Her hand froze over the pill organizer. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, but her voice had changed. The warmth was gone. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the warm light from my overhead fixture casting harsh shadows across Melissa's face. The familiar scent of our Chinese takeout now seemed cloying, mixing unpleasantly with the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. You know exactly what I mean, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What did you just slip into my pill organizer from your pocket? Melissa's fingers drummed once against the kitchen table, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. The caring friend who had walked through my door an hour ago was dissolving before my eyes, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You're being paranoid, she said, but she didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she focused on screwing the cap back onto my prescription bottle with deliberate precision. This is exactly what I've been worried about. These episodes where you imagine things that aren't happening. Episodes? The word came out sharper than I intended. Is that what you call it when I notice you tampering with my medication? She looked up then, and the coldness in her expression made my breath catch. You're clearly having another breakdown. Maybe we should call Dorothy. Or better yet, maybe it's time we seriously discussed getting you some professional help. The calculated cruelty in her voice hit me like a physical blow. This woman had been my friend for 3 years. She'd helped me move apartments, celebrated my promotion, held my hand through my father's funeral. Yet here she sat, calmly gaslighting me while poison pills lay scattered across my kitchen table. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why are you doing this to me? For a moment, something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. I'm trying to help you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. You've been struggling so much lately. The anxiety, the confusion at work, the memory problems. I thought if I could just adjust your medication slightly, maybe add something to help you sleep better, you'd start feeling more stable. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost wanted to believe it. Almost wanted to go back to trusting her, to letting her take care of me the way she had been. But I could feel the weight of Dorothy's evidence in my pocket, and I knew better. What did you add to my pills, Melissa? She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against my tile floor. I think I should go. You're clearly not well enough for a rational conversation right now. Sit down. The command came from behind me, and both Melissa and I whipped around to see Dorothy emerging from the hallway, her face grim. She moved into the kitchen with the purposeful stride I remembered from childhood when she'd caught me in some mischief. Dorothy? Melissa's voice went up an octave. I didn't realize you were here. No, I imagine you didn't. Dorothy positioned herself between Melissa and the door, crossing her arms. Because if you had known, you wouldn't have just slipped that little white pill into my sister's medication. Melissa's face drained of color. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Dorothy pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. My own voice filled the kitchen, asking what Melissa had put in the Wednesday compartment, followed by Melissa's defensive response. You recorded me? Melissa's composure finally cracked completely. That's illegal. You can't record someone without their consent. Actually, Sophia's voice came from the living room doorway. In this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. And since this is my sister's apartment, and she consented, we're perfectly within our rights. Melissa spun toward Sophia, her eyes wide with something that looked like genuine panic now. Sophia, thank God you're here too. Your sister is having some kind of psychotic break. She's accusing me of poisoning her or something equally ridiculous. But Sophia wasn't buying it any more than Dorothy had. She stepped into the kitchen, and suddenly the three women I trusted most in the world were all here, all on my side. The relief was overwhelming. We know what you've been doing, Sophia said quietly. We have photographs of the pills you've been substituting. We have recordings of your admissions. And we have documentation of how you've been contacting her workplace to report her supposed instability. The last bit of color drained from Melissa's face. You've been investigating me? We've been protecting her, Dorothy corrected. Which is apparently something she needed protection from you. Melissa looked between the three of us, trapped. For a long moment, the only sound in my kitchen was the hum of my refrigerator and the distant traffic outside my window. Then Melissa's shoulders sagged, and when she spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller. More vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. You don't understand, she whispered. I never meant for it to go this far. Then explain it, Sophia said. Make us understand why you've been systematically destroying our sister's life. Melissa sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but I found I couldn't summon any sympathy for her. It started so small, she began, her voice barely audible. Just one pill, just once. But before she could continue, my doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. We all froze. Were you expecting someone? Dorothy asked me. I shook my head, my heart starting to race again. No one else knows about tonight. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Then came a loud knock. Police, open up. We have reports of a domestic disturbance at this address. My blood turned to ice. The police? Here? Now? I didn't call them, I said quickly, looking between my sisters and Melissa. Neither did I, Dorothy said, her voice tight with concern. Sophia shook her head as well, but her eyes were fixed on Melissa, who had gone completely pale. "Melissa?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. The knocking grew more insistent. "This is the police! We need someone to answer the door immediately!" Melissa's hands were shaking now. I might have made a call earlier, before I came over. I was worried about you, and I thought, "You called the police on her?" Sophia's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Tonight? When you knew we were all coming over to confront you?" "I was scared." Melissa's voice cracked. "I didn't know what you might do to me. I thought if the police were involved, it would protect me." The irony was staggering. After months of making me question my own sanity, after convincing everyone around me that I was unstable, she had called the very authorities who might finally see the truth about what she'd been doing. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to open this door right now." "I have to answer," I said, my mind racing. What would they think when they found us all here? What story had Melissa told them? Dorothy grabbed my arm gently. "Wait, what exactly did you tell them, Melissa?" Melissa's eyes darted between us. "I told them I was concerned about my friend's mental health, that she'd been acting erratically, and I was worried she might hurt herself or others." "Unbelievable," Sophia muttered. "Even now, you're still trying to make her look unstable." I walked toward the front door, my legs feeling unsteady. This was it. Either the police would see through Melissa's manipulation, or they'd take one look at this scene and assume I really was having some kind of breakdown. As I reached for the door handle, I turned back to look at my sisters and Melissa. Dorothy gave me an encouraging nod. Sophia held up her phone, presumably still recording, and Melissa sat hunched in her chair, looking smaller and more frightened than I'd ever seen her. "Remember," Dorothy said quietly, "we have evidence. We have proof. Tell them the truth." I took a deep breath and opened the door to find two uniformed officers standing in my hallway. The older one, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes, stepped forward first. "Good evening, ma'am. We received a call about a possible mental health crisis at this address. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "There's no crisis here, but there is something you should know." The second officer, younger with a serious expression, looked past me into the apartment. "We were told you might not be aware of your condition. The caller said you've been having episodes." "The caller," I said carefully, "is the person who's been causing my supposed episodes. Officers, I think you need to come in and hear what we've discovered tonight." The older officer studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's talk." As they stepped into my apartment, I caught sight of Melissa's face. She looked like someone who had just realized their carefully constructed house of cards was about to come tumbling down. But as the officers entered my living room and took in the scene, the younger one's radio crackled to life with an urgent message that made all of us freeze. The radio's static cut through the tension in the room like a knife. "Unit 47, we have a domestic disturbance 2 blocks from your location, possible weapons involved. Need immediate backup." The younger officer's hand moved toward his radio, but the older officer held up a finger. "We're in the middle of something here, Jackson. Let dispatch know we need 5 more minutes." She turned back to us, her experienced eyes taking in the scene more carefully now. Melissa sat rigid in the chair, her face pale. Dorothy and Sophia flanked the couch where evidence was still scattered across the coffee table. I stood near the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Officer Martinez," the older woman said, introducing herself. "Now, what exactly has been discovered here tonight?" I glanced at Dorothy, who gave me another encouraging nod. "Officer, for months I've been experiencing what seemed like memory problems, confusion, mood swings. My friend Melissa convinced me I was having some kind of mental health crisis, but tonight, my sisters helped me realize that my medication has been tampered with." Officer Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. "Tampered with how?" "Pills replaced with something else," Sophia said, stepping forward. "We found evidence in her purse." She gestured toward Melissa, whose breathing had become noticeably shallow. "That's not what happened," Melissa said quickly, her voice higher than usual. "She's been paranoid lately, seeing conspiracies everywhere." I called because I'm genuinely worried about her state of mind. The younger officer, Jackson, looked between us with obvious confusion. "So, who exactly are we supposed to believe here?" Dorothy moved toward the coffee table. "Officers, we have physical evidence, pills that don't match the prescription, documentation of symptoms that align with specific drug interactions. This isn't paranoia or mental illness. This is deliberate poisoning." The word poisoning hung in the air like smoke. I watched Officer Martinez's expression grow more serious as she processed what Dorothy had said. "Ma'am," she said to Melissa, "I need you to remain seated while we sort this out, and I'm going to need to see some identification from everyone." As we began reaching for our wallets, Melissa suddenly stood up. "I don't have to sit here and listen to these accusations. I was trying to help her. Everything I did was because I care about her." "Sit down, please," Officer Jackson said firmly. "Everything you did?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "So you admit you did something?" Melissa's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flash of the friend I thought I knew. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. My job, my life, everything's been falling apart, and you always seemed to have it so together, even when you were struggling. I just needed people to see that you weren't perfect." The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Sophia actually gasped. Dorothy closed her eyes briefly, as if processing the sheer cruelty of what we'd just heard. "So you made me sick," I said, the full weight of betrayal settling over me like a heavy blanket. "You made me question my own mind. You convinced everyone around me that I was unstable." "I never meant for it to go this far," Melissa whispered, tears starting to stream down her face. "It started small, just switching a few pills here and there when you weren't looking. But then you got so scared, so dependent on me, and I felt needed for the first time in years." Officer Martinez was already reaching for her handcuffs. "Ma'am, you need to understand that what you're describing constitutes several serious crimes." But as she moved toward Melissa, the radio crackled again, this time with an urgent tone that made both officers freeze. "All units, we have a report of shots fired at 1247 Oak Street. That's 1 block from Unit 47's current location. Martinez, Jackson, need you there now." Officer Martinez looked frustrated, torn between the crisis unfolding in my living room and whatever emergency was developing outside. "Jackson, call for another unit to come here. We can't leave this unresolved." "Copy that," Jackson said, reaching for his radio. But as he began to make the call, Melissa suddenly bolted toward my balcony door, her movements desperate and erratic. "Stop!" Officer Jackson shouted, but Melissa was already fumbling with the balcony door handle, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip it. I found myself moving without thinking, stepping between Melissa and the sliding glass door. "Don't do this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Running will only make everything worse." Melissa spun around to face me, her eyes wild with panic. "Worse? How could it possibly be worse? I just confessed to poisoning my best friend. My life is over." "Your life isn't over," Dorothy said firmly, rising from her chair. But you need to face what you've done. Running away solves nothing. Easy for you to say, Melissa shot back, her desperation making her voice sharp. You're not the one who's going to prison. Sophia, who had been sitting quietly through Melissa's confession, finally spoke up. You should have thought about that before you started tampering with her medication. Do you have any idea what you put her through? What you put all of us through? The weight of Sophia's words seemed to hit Melissa like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her back pressing against the balcony door. I know what I did was wrong. I know that. But I was drowning, and she seemed so put together, so capable of handling everything life threw at her. So you decided to tear me down instead of asking for help? I asked, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. We were friends, Melissa. If you had told me you were struggling, I would have been there for you. Officer Martinez stepped closer, her hand resting on her handcuffs but not yet drawing them. Ma'am, I understand you're scared, but cooperating now is your best option. We can work with people who are honest about what they've done. Melissa's legs seemed to give out, and she slid down the glass door until she was sitting on the floor, her head in her hands. I started switching just a few of your anxiety pills with caffeine pills I bought online. I told myself it was harmless, that it would just make you a little jittery. A little jittery? Dorothy's voice was incredulous. She was having panic attacks. She thought she was losing her mind. I know. Melissa's voice cracked. When I saw how scared you were getting, I should have stopped. But then you started depending on me more, calling me when you felt anxious, asking me to help you with things. For the first time in months, I felt like someone actually needed me. I sank onto the couch, the full scope of her betrayal still sinking in. So, you escalated. You started tampering with my other medications too. Melissa nodded miserably. I replaced some of your sleep aids with stimulants. And I started diluting your antidepressants with water, making them less effective. I convinced myself I was just making you more interesting, more human. But really, I was making myself indispensable. Officer Jackson's radio crackled again with updates from the emergency down the street, but he kept his attention focused on our situation. Ma'am, what you're describing is criminal tampering with medication, possibly attempted poisoning, and definitely assault. These are serious felony charges. I never wanted to seriously hurt her, Melissa whispered. I just wanted to feel important again. My boyfriend left me, my job was hanging by a thread, and she was the only good thing in my life. I was terrified of losing her too. Sophia leaned forward, her expression a mixture of disgust and sadness. So, instead of being honest with her about your fears, you manipulated her brain chemistry. You made her question her own sanity. The room fell silent except for Melissa's quiet sobbing. I stared at this person who I had trusted completely, trying to reconcile the friend I thought I knew with the person who had systematically poisoned me for months. How long? I asked quietly. How long were you doing this? Melissa looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. 4 months. It started right after David broke up with me. I came over that night, remember? You let me cry on your couch, and you went to make tea. I saw your pill organizer on the kitchen counter, and I had some caffeine pills in my purse from when I was trying to pull all-nighters at work. I switched out 3 of your anxiety pills before you came back. I did remember that night. I remembered how Melissa had seemed so broken, so lost. I had spent hours trying to comfort her, assuring her that she would get through the breakup. And the whole time, she was plotting to sabotage my mental health. The next week, you called me because you were feeling anxious about a work presentation. Melissa continued, her voice barely audible. You said you didn't understand why your medication wasn't working like it used to. But instead of being concerned, I felt powerful, like I had some control over something for the first time in months. Dorothy moved to sit beside me on the couch, her presence solid and comforting. This is exactly the kind of manipulation tactics we read about in psychology journals, creating dependency by manufacturing crises. Officer Martinez checked her watch, clearly torn between this situation and the emergency call they'd received. Look, I need to be honest with everyone. We're going to have to respond to that shots fired call, but we can't leave this unresolved. Ms. Melissa, I need you to make a choice right now. Are you going to cooperate with us? Or are we going to have to arrest you on the spot? Melissa slowly got to her feet, her movements defeated. I'll cooperate. I know what I did was wrong. I know I need to face the consequences. But just as Officer Martinez began to relax slightly, her radio erupted with another urgent call. All units, suspect from Oak Street incident is fleeing on foot toward residential area. Considered armed and dangerous. The officer's face went pale as she realized the implications. The dangerous situation was heading directly toward my neighborhood. The radio crackled again with updates that made my blood run cold. The armed suspect was now just 3 blocks away, heading directly through our residential area. Officer Martinez's training clearly told her to respond immediately, but she looked torn between leaving us in this volatile situation with Melissa's confession still hanging in the air. I can't leave you all alone with this, Officer Martinez said, her hand hovering over her radio. But I also can't ignore an active shooter situation. Dorothy immediately stood up, her years of managing crisis situations at the hospital kicking in. We'll be fine here. Melissa has admitted what she did, and she's not going to run. Are you, Melissa? Melissa shook her head slowly, still clutching the tissue I had given her. No, I'm not going anywhere. I need to make this right somehow. Officer Martinez looked between the 3 of us, clearly calculating the risks. Lock your doors the moment I leave. Don't let anyone else in, no matter what. I'll be back as soon as we have the suspect in custody. She paused at the door. And Melissa, don't even think about changing your story or disappearing. This conversation isn't over. The moment the door closed behind her, an awkward silence settled over us. Dorothy moved to the window and peered through the blinds, while I found myself staring at Melissa as if seeing her for the first time. 4 months, I said, the reality still sinking in. 4 months of thinking I was losing my mind. Melissa's shoulders shook with fresh tears. I know there's no excuse for what I did. When David left me, I felt like my whole world was crumbling. But that doesn't justify what I did to you. Dorothy turned from the window, her expression stern. Justification is one thing, but I need to understand the mechanics of this. How did you keep getting access to her medication? How did you know which pills to switch? I looked up her prescription online, Melissa admitted. The pills were a specific oval shape and color. I bought caffeine pills that looked similar, and whenever I came over, I would find a reason to go into the kitchen alone. Sometimes I would volunteer to get water or offer to clean up after dinner. I remembered those moments now with horrible clarity. How many times had Melissa insisted on helping me clean up or offered to grab something from the kitchen for me? I had thought she was being a good friend. The worst part, I said slowly, is that every time I called you having a panic attack, you were the one who rushed over to comfort me. You created the crisis and then swooped in to be the hero. Dorothy sat back down beside me, her presence anchoring me to the moment. That's classic manipulation behavior. Create the dependency, then fulfill it to maintain control. Melissa looked up at both of us, her face blotchy from crying. I never meant for it to go on so long. At first, I told myself it would just be once or twice. But then, you started calling me more, needing me more, and I felt important in your life in a way I never had before. Important? I felt anger rising in my chest. You felt important by watching me suffer? I know how it sounds, Melissa said quickly. But you have to understand, I felt completely worthless after David left. My job was going nowhere. I was barely keeping up with my rent, and then the one person I thought loved me decided I wasn't worth fighting for. Dorothy's voice was sharp. So instead of getting help for your own problems, you decided to create problems for someone else? The sound of sirens grew closer outside, reminding us that there was still a dangerous situation unfolding in our neighborhood. Dorothy got up to check the locks on all the doors, her movements efficient and protective. What I don't understand, I said to Melissa, is why you didn't just talk to me. If you were struggling that badly, if you needed support, I would have been there for you. We were friends. Were, Melissa repeated quietly. Past tense. I considered that. Were we still friends? Could we ever be friends again after this betrayal? The person sitting across from me had deliberately sabotaged my mental health for months, had watched me question my own sanity, had comforted me through panic attacks that she had caused. Dorothy returned from checking the doors and sat down across from Melissa. I think what my sister is trying to understand is how someone she trusted completely could systematically hurt her while pretending to care. I did care, Melissa said quickly. I still care. That's why I couldn't keep doing it. That's why I stopped switching your pills 3 weeks ago. I stared at her. You stopped 3 weeks ago? Yes, I couldn't stand watching you suffer anymore. But by then, I was terrified of what would happen if you found out what I had done. That timeline made sense. 3 weeks ago was when I had started feeling more stable, when my medication had seemed to start working properly again. I had attributed it to finally adjusting to the prescription, never imagining that someone had been interfering with it. The sirens outside grew louder, then seemed to stop just a few blocks away. Dorothy moved back to the window, keeping watch while Melissa and I continued to navigate this devastating revelation. So what happens now? Melissa asked quietly. I know I need to face consequences. I know what I did was illegal. I looked at this person who had been such a central part of my life, who had shared countless dinners and movie nights and conversations with me, who had held me while I cried through panic attacks that she had caused. Now we wait for Officer Martinez to come back, I said finally. And then you're going to tell her everything, in detail, so she can write a proper report. Melissa nodded, accepting this. But first, Dorothy interjected, I need to know if there are any other pills you switched. Anything else you did that could affect my sister's health? No, Melissa said immediately. Only the anxiety medication. I never touched anything else. I felt a small measure of relief at that, but then another thought struck me. What about other things? Did you do anything else to make me seem unstable or unreliable? Melissa was quiet for a long moment, and my heart sank as I realized there was more. Tell me, I said firmly. Sometimes, Melissa said slowly, when we were out together, I would contradict things you said. Small things. Like if you mentioned a conversation we had, I might say I remembered it differently. Or if you were trying to remember when something happened, I might give you the wrong date. Dorothy's intake of breath was sharp. Gaslighting. You were gaslighting her on top of tampering with her medication. The full scope of the manipulation was becoming clear, and I felt sick. Melissa hadn't just sabotaged my medication. She had systematically undermined my confidence in my own memory and perceptions. But before I could respond, we heard the sound of breaking glass somewhere nearby, followed immediately by shouting voices. Dorothy rushed to the window and her face went white. "The suspect," she said urgently. "He just broke into the house across the street." The crash and shouting from across the street made all of us freeze. Dorothy pressed herself against the window frame, peering out carefully while staying out of direct sight. "I can see movement in the front room," Dorothy whispered. "Looks like he's searching through things. This is bad. Mrs. Chen lives alone over there." "Should we call 911? I asked, my voice tight with anxiety that for once wasn't chemically manufactured. "Officer Martinez said she'd be back in 20 minutes. That was only 10 minutes ago." Dorothy's hands were pressed against the glass. "But I don't think we can wait." Melissa had gone completely silent, sitting rigidly on the couch. The reality of everything, her confession, the police involvement, and now this dangerous situation unfolding, seemed to have overwhelmed her completely. "Dorothy, get away from the window," I said firmly. "If he sees you watching, he might come over here." She stepped back reluctantly. "You're right. But what if Mrs. Chen comes home? She usually gets back from her evening walk around this time." The thought sent a chill through me. Mrs. Chen was 78 years old and walked with a cane. If she walked into her house not knowing someone had broken in, "We have to do something," I said, surprised by my own decisiveness. 3 weeks ago, in the height of my medication-induced instability, I wouldn't have been able to think clearly in a crisis like this. Now I found myself actually capable of rational thought under pressure. "Like what?" Dorothy asked. "We can't go over there. That would be incredibly dangerous." "No, but we can call 911 and report the break-in. Even if Officer Martinez is coming back here, patrol cars need to know about this immediately." I reached for my phone, but Melissa suddenly spoke up. "What if they think you're having another episode?" she asked quietly. "What if they think you're paranoid or seeing things that aren't there?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even after confessing everything, Melissa was inadvertently highlighting how deeply she had undermined my credibility. How many times had she suggested I was overreacting or misperceiving situations? "That's exactly the kind of thing you've been doing to me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Making me doubt my own judgment, my own perceptions." "I'm sorry," Melissa said quickly. "I didn't mean it that way. I just meant—" "You just meant what?" "That even now, when there's clearly someone breaking into a house across the street, I should second-guess what I'm seeing." Dorothy moved away from the window and came to stand beside me. "You're seeing clearly," she said firmly. "You're thinking clearly. And you're right. We need to call this in immediately." I dialed 911, grateful that my sister's confidence in me helped steady my own resolve. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly and calmly. "I'm reporting a break-in in progress. Someone just smashed the front window of the house at 847 Oak Street and is currently inside. The homeowner is an elderly woman who lives alone and isn't home right now, but she might return soon." The dispatcher asked for my name and location, which I provided, then asked me to stay on the line while she dispatched units. "Units are en route," she told me. "Please remain in your home and do not approach the scene." "Can you still see the suspect?" I looked at Dorothy, who had returned to the window. She nodded. "My sister can see movement inside the house. The suspect appears to be searching through the front room." "Is anyone else in the house with the suspect?" "No, the homeowner isn't home, but she's elderly and usually returns from her evening walk around this time. She walks with a cane and might not realize someone has broken in. We've noted that. Officers should be there within 5 minutes. Please stay on the line. Melissa had remained quiet during the entire call, but now she spoke up again. I'm sorry I said that about them not believing you. That was another example of what I've been doing, wasn't it? Making you question yourself. Yes, I said simply. It was. I didn't even realize I was still doing it. It's like it became a habit. Melissa's voice was small. Even after I stopped tampering with your pills, I kept undermining your confidence in other ways. Dorothy shot her a look. How long did that continue? The gaslighting? I don't know exactly. Maybe it never completely stopped. Melissa's admission hung in the air. Even last week, when you were telling that story about the weird customer at the coffee shop, I remember thinking you were exaggerating, and I said something about how you always make stories more dramatic than they really are. I remembered that conversation. Melissa's comment had made me doubt whether I was being accurate about what had happened, and I'd ended up feeling embarrassed about sharing the story at all. That customer really was acting strange, wasn't it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, Melissa said. You described exactly what happened. I don't know why I said that. It was automatic. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Ma'am, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Officers are pulling up to the scene now. Do you see the patrol cars? Dorothy peered out the window. I can see the lights. 2 cars just pulled up. Suddenly, we heard shouting from across the street. Loud, aggressive male voices mixed with authoritative police commands. Then the sound of someone running. He's running, Dorothy said urgently. The suspect just ran out the back of the house. The officers are chasing him. The dispatcher was relaying this information to the officers. Within moments, we heard more shouting from what sounded like the alley behind Mrs. Chen's house, then relative quiet. It sounds like they got him, Dorothy said, relief evident in her voice. The dispatcher confirmed that the suspect was in custody and told me I could hang up. As I ended the call, we all sat in the sudden quiet of my living room. The crisis across the street resolved, but our own personal crisis still hanging over us. You handled that really well, Dorothy said to me. You were calm, clear, decisive. Nothing like how you've been over the past few months. Because I wasn't fighting against my own medication, I replied, looking directly at Melissa. Because my brain chemistry wasn't being sabotaged. Melissa met my gaze. I robbed you of months of stability, months of feeling like yourself. Yes, you did. We sat with that acknowledgement for a moment. Then Dorothy spoke up. When Officer Martinez gets back, you need to tell her about the gaslighting too. All of it. Not just the medication tampering. I will, Melissa said. But I need to understand something first. I need to understand how I became someone who could do these things to a person I care about. That's something you'll need to figure out with a therapist, I said. Not something I can help you with. I know, Melissa trailed off, then started again. I keep trying to remember when I made the decision to switch your pills the first time, and I can't. I remember doing it, but I can't remember the moment I decided to do it. It's like it just happened. That doesn't make it less serious, Dorothy said firmly. I know that. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying to understand how I got to that point. Before anyone could respond, we heard a car door slam outside, followed by footsteps on the front walk. Dorothy looked out the window. Officer Martinez is back, she said. My stomach tightened as I realized we were about to move from private confession to official police business. Everything Melissa had admitted to me would now become part of a formal investigation. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Melissa. She took a deep breath. "No, but I need to do it anyway." The knock on the door was firm and professional. As I got up to answer it, I realized that despite everything, the betrayal, the months of unnecessary suffering, the systematic undermining of my confidence, I felt more mentally clear and capable than I had in a long time. Whatever happened next, I would face it with a mind that was finally working the way it was supposed to. But when I opened the door, Officer Martinez's expression was grim in a way that had nothing to do with our medication tampering report. "Before we continue with your case," she said, "I need to inform you that the suspect we just apprehended across the street had your address written on a piece of paper in his pocket." The blood drained from my face as Officer Martinez's words sank in. "What do you mean he had my address?" "The man we arrested for attempted break-in. He had a slip of paper with this exact address and your name written on it. We need to determine if there's a connection to your medication tampering case." Dorothy immediately moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the police cars still parked across the street. "This can't be a coincidence." I felt my legs go weak and sank back into my chair. After months of feeling like I was losing my grip on reality, now I was facing the possibility that someone I didn't even know might be targeting me. "I don't understand. Who was this person? Do I know him?" "We're still processing his identification, but based on his appearance and the items in his possession, we believe he may be connected to drug trafficking," Officer Martinez said, stepping fully into the living room. "Which brings me to an important question about your medication." Melissa, who had been silent since the officer's arrival, suddenly straightened. "What kind of question?" "We need to know exactly how many pills were tampered with and over what time period. If someone was expecting to find a supply of your legitimate medication here, that could explain the attempted break-in." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You're saying someone might have been planning to steal my medication?" "It's a possibility we need to explore. Psychiatric medications, particularly mood stabilizers and anti-anxiety medications, have street value. If someone knew you had a regular prescription..." Dorothy moved away from the window and sat down heavily. "But how would a random drug dealer know about her prescription? That information isn't public." Officer Martinez looked directly at Melissa. "That's what we need to figure out. Miss, when you were tampering with the medication, did you dispose of the original pills? Sell them? Give them to someone?" Melissa's face went completely white. I threw them away. Most of them, but not all of them." My heart started racing. "What do you mean, not all of them?" "The first month, I panicked after I'd switched them. I thought maybe I was making a terrible mistake, so I kept the real pills in a bag in my car, just in case I needed to switch them back." "And then what happened to those pills?" Officer Martinez asked, pulling out her notebook. Melissa's hands were shaking now. "My car was broken into about 6 weeks ago. I filed a police report, but I never mentioned the medication because I didn't want to explain why I had someone else's pills." Dorothy and I exchanged looks. "Melissa, why didn't you tell us about the break-in?" Dorothy asked. "Because I was afraid you'd ask too many questions about what was stolen. I reported the obvious stuff. My GPS, some cash, but not the medication." Officer Martinez was writing rapidly. "Do you remember exactly how many pills were taken?" "About 30 pills, maybe more. They were in a small Ziploc bag in my glove compartment." I felt sick. "So, someone has been walking around for 6 weeks with a bag of my medication, and now they're trying to break into my house?" "It's possible they were looking for more," Officer Martinez said. Drug dealers often assume that if someone has a supply of prescription medication, there's more where that came from. Dorothy stood up and started pacing. This is insane. Not only did you put her health at risk by switching her pills, but now we're dealing with criminals who think she's running some kind of drug operation out of her house? Melissa was crying now. I never thought. I just panicked and kept them. I never imagined this could happen. But it did happen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. And now, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Officer Martinez, is this person still a threat to me? He's in custody, but we need to determine if he was working alone or if there are others who might target this address. Can you think of anyone else who might know about your medication schedule? Anyone who's been asking questions about your prescriptions? I thought carefully. No, I keep that information private. The only people who knew about my medication issues were Dorothy and Melissa. What about your pharmacy? Any unusual interactions there? Nothing out of the ordinary. I use the drive-thru mostly, same pharmacy for years. Officer Martinez closed her notebook. Here's what we need to do. I'm going to call in additional patrol units to monitor this area for the next few days. You should consider staying somewhere else temporarily, at least until we can determine if there are other individuals involved. Dorothy immediately spoke up. She can stay at my place. I have a security system, and I'm only 10 minutes away. I don't want to put you in danger, too, I said. You're not putting me in danger. The person who put you in danger is sitting right here, Dorothy said, looking pointedly at Melissa. Melissa wiped her eyes. I know I have no right to ask this, but is there anything I can do to help fix this situation? Officer Martinez answered before I could. Yes, you can provide us with the exact police report number from your car break-in, the location where it occurred, and any details you remember about what was taken. We need to connect these cases officially. I have all that information on my phone, Melissa said, pulling it out with trembling hands. As she scrolled through her phone, I realized that what had started as a betrayal by someone I trusted had now escalated into a genuine safety threat from strangers. The violation felt deeper somehow. Not only had my body chemistry been manipulated without my knowledge, but now my physical safety was at risk because of decisions Melissa had made in secret. Here it is, Melissa said, reading off numbers and details to Officer Martinez. The break-in happened at the grocery store parking lot on 5th Street. I was inside shopping for about an hour. That's a known area for opportunistic car break-ins, Officer Martinez said. But most of those are random crimes looking for electronics and cash. The fact that medication was taken suggests either extraordinary bad luck or what? Dorothy asked. Or someone was specifically watching for opportunities to steal prescription drugs. We've seen an increase in that type of targeted theft. The room fell silent as we all processed this information. I looked around at the 3 people who had been my support system. Dorothy, who was trying to protect me, Officer Martinez, who was trying to solve a crime, and Melissa, who had created this entire nightmare through her deception. I need to pack a bag, I said finally. If I'm staying at Dorothy's for a few days, I should get my things together. I'll help you, Dorothy offered. I should go, Melissa said quietly. But first, is there anything else you need me to tell Officer Martinez? Anything else about the medication tampering? I thought about it. Despite everything that had happened, I found myself grateful that Melissa was being honest now, even though her honesty had revealed an even bigger problem. Just tell her everything, every detail you can remember about when you switched the pills, how you did it, what you did with the originals. Everything. Melissa nodded and turned to Officer Martinez. It started about 4 months ago. As Melissa began recounting the full scope of her deception to the officer, I headed toward my bedroom to pack. Dorothy followed me. "Are you holding up okay?" Dorothy asked once we were out of earshot. "Honestly, I'm terrified, but I'm also clearer than I've been in months. At least now I know what I'm dealing with." "We'll figure this out," Dorothy said firmly. "And once we do, you're going to be stronger than ever." I hoped she was right, but as I packed clothes for an indefinite stay away from my own home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst might not be over yet.